Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thank you for holding this very important matter before the public, and to the ranking member as well. Thank you. Ms. O'Connor, would you like to shed maybe a little bit of light on the dialogue that we just witnessed over the last 3 or 4 minutes about the EU and maybe the mistakes they made and the things that we could learn and the cross-reference between innovation and privacy?
Thank you so much, sir. I think it's fairly certain that we in the United States will pass a United States law that reflects our values and our cultural traditions and our unique opportunity here as the birthplace of Silicon Valley. But I think there are also our shared values of respect and dignity, values of customer trust that our companies, our US-bred companies, can certainly adhere to. I think privacy and security are a form of corporate social responsibility in the digital age and are essential to doing business in a thriving US economy and around the world. Yes, it is important to get to a federal standard, but it's important that that standard be strong and be understandable by small, medium, and large enterprises in the United States, and most importantly, be one that customers can trust, that consumers and citizens of this country can have certainty that their information is being treated fairly, that they are not being discriminated against, and that they understand the consequences of the bargains that they strike with companies.
Well, one thing that I enjoy the most is being able to go back to my district, and I'm blessed that my 2 grandchildren live in my district, so I can drive 5 minutes, jump on the carpet, and roll around with them and play with them, and know that when they grab a toy, like my 6-month-old, she's at that age where everything goes in her mouth. Know that consumer protection is something that we take for granted in this country. We didn't do that back in the day, maybe decades ago, but at least today, I know that there's a 99.999% chance that that toy is not going to hurt my little granddaughter. Speaking of children, under the CCPA, businesses are supposed to provide an opt-in mechanism for children 16 and under to allow companies to sell their personal information as defined by the CCPA. How do they know whether the children are 16 and under any system?
Well, that's such a great point because it requires more authentication and more knowledge in order to know who your consumer is. I think you've identified one of the very compelling gaps in our coverage right now, the above COPPA but below majority age group in our country. I have several of those people living in my house right now, and they are a challenging age on the internet, to say the least. And it certainly bears consideration of what we should do going forward to consider whether COPPA is working adequately and what to do with that in-between age group.
What's the mechanism for to get parental consent for children under 13?
It's somewhat complicated and requires several steps of the parent self-authenticating and providing phone numbers or email addresses or the like. I seem to do this every single day on my computer for my youngest child. But it still is fraught with some peril that the child may be providing inaccurate information or that the data may be used in a way that is unanticipated by the parent or the child.
Under the federal law COPPA, companies must obtain parental consent before collecting personal information online from children under the age of 13. How do companies verify parental consent, and how does the FTC enforce this?
The parent often has to respond to an email verifying that they are the parent or that they have authorization. The FTC has taken some cases, and I think there is concern in the marketplace about whether the enforcement mechanisms have really fully grasped the complexity of the issue, both in the online world and, as you point out, in the Internet of Things world.
What seems to be the logic or the history on the difference between a 12-year-old and a 13-year-old, and why is that the cutoff point?
I'm sorry I can't speak to the legislative history on why that number. It certainly is one that bears relevance in a number of cultural traditions, but I think we all know that one 13-year-old is not the same as another in many households, and there's a large age group between, again, 13 and 18 that we should be thinking about as well.
Okay. How do we expect a 13-year-old to wade through this without parental consent or somebody, an adult, helping them?
I totally agree. I think kids, teenagers, and grown-ups in this country deserve greater supports and protections around their personal data online and off.
I think it would be naive for us to believe that there isn't a motivation out there with the the largest corporations in the world and getting more dominant and larger, for them not to look at our children as consumers. If you look at the bandwidth of a consumer power of a teenager and a 20-some-year-old and a 30-some-year-old, et cetera, there's tremendous motivation for individuals to abuse the information of our children. And I think it's important that Congress, thank you for the confidence you gave that you believe that Congress is actually going to pass something. I hope that we do. Thank you for that confidence. I yield back.